I'm Mike Oudts. I'm with Asel Yashanova and Derek Draper. I'm part of Atomic Architecture, which is a British and Kazakh architecture and design practice. We enjoy collaboration, and our work is kind of very process-driven. It's the process-driven approach to design. We like to go through steps, work with our clients, and discover, research, and try and find the best solutions through a process of investigation. And we work at a variety of different scales and across different sectors, both in the UK and in Kazakhstan. The project on the top left is a sort of a large residential scheme in Croydon in South London. And then the project on the top right is a temporary building which we did for Arbat Fest in Almaty. We also look at urban realm, and we work with landscaping. This is a project we did, a competition we won at the University of Cambridge for landscaping at the library. But we also work on other cultural projects. So we just completed an exhibition which is at the National Museum in Astana at the moment, called City Nomads, which kind of looks at the kind of new designers in Kazakhstan today. And lastly, and then it's kind of slightly, the pack is slightly incorrect. Actually, Asel Yashanova is the founder of Urban Forum Almaty. And this is an independent platform for dialogue to kind of review and discuss the urban environment. So we heard about the establishment of Astana, the master plan, and I think what has been delivered and achieved in such a short period of time, a relatively short period of time, is really incredible. And I mean, my first contact with Astana goes back 13 years, and I worked on the very early stages of the pyramid with fostering partners. And in the kind of the 13 years since, you know, I've kind of seen incredible change. Every time I come to Astana, there is something different, something new to see. Last night, trying to get an Uber taxi, realised that the city block that I was in wasn't even on the Uber map yet. And much of that master plan is complete. But I think personally, as an architect and a visitor and an observer of the city, I think that I think it's maybe time to review the master plan, understand its successes, and see how it can be made better. Could it go backwards? So as we've heard, actually, Astana has a very symbolic role both nationally and internationally. And the long-term success, I believe, though, is not made by the city symbols and by its architecture alone, but it's about the success of its urbanism, its urban environment. And Johan Klaus, who's the executive director of United Nations Habitat, he has what he calls a three-legged approach to successful urbanisation, and that's the first rule is the first point is rules and regulations. The second is good urban design, and the third is a financial plan. And when I look around the city, I often think about these three principles and how they manifest themselves within Astana. And I see the beautiful buildings, and I see buildings, you know, the buildings which are taken from other civilizations, if you like, but also there's a very unique flavour of the architecture in Astana. But I also see kind of a varying quality of the buildings. Some of the buildings are exceptional and some need work. I also see a quickly expanding city. But with the expansion, I see a lot of gaps. I see lots of spaces in between the city. And I sometimes wonder if the development has even outstripped the current demand. So there's three areas which I think could be looked at to help shape the future of Astana. And that's looking at an urban framework as opposed to the master plan necessarily. looking at the infrastructure and how to create a comfortable city. We've been talking about comfortable cities, but how do you actually do that? So look at urban framework first. So going back to 1992, before Astana was really established, the white circle is a diameter of 20 kilometres. You can see after a few years, 5 years after the master plan, Astana starting to take shape on the left bank. And as it is today. And you can see that the city has really expanded very, very quickly. I think for the master plan, for me, represents something which is fairly rigid, not necessarily flexible, although there is the flexibility within the master plan of Astana, and in terms of the kind of the concept of metabolism. And I think that an urban framework at this stage might work better than a master plan to actually develop what's here, see what's here, what is working, and see what things can be improved. And in the UK, we use this technique quite often. So this is the kind of the planning development policy that we use for projects that I showed earlier, the residential scheme. And here we have like the on the top left, we have our national framework for planning policy. And because the project is in London, the Mayor of London has its own London plan, and that kind of governs things like the minimum size of apartments. It governs the sustainability criteria. And then the project sits within the borough of Croydon, so the next step is the Croydon framework. Within Croydon then itself, it has a number of other smaller areas, smaller parts of the borough, and they're set out in their strategic policies. And within one of those areas was the Old Town, which has its own little master plan, which is like a supplementary guidance for architects and planners. And within that also, we have another stage, which is like the conservation areas, which are areas which have a particular character that we want to kind of maintain. This approach enables kind of a top-down approach from government to set policy, but also enables local stakeholders to influence how the city develops. And although this is, London, I have to say, it takes forever to get anything done in London, but I can imagine that a simplified version of this could be something that could work quite well in Astana. Moving on to infrastructure. So the traffic you get, and I've seen quite a lot of traffic in Astana, particularly in an evening. The traffic you get depends on the infrastructure that you build, and if you build it, people will use it. This is a little study done in Seattle, looking at commuter traffic within the city. And the study was done with 200 people in 177 cars, and they looked to see what happens if you take the cars out of the equation. And here you are. So you have these huge streets carrying relatively few people from their homes to their work, and vice versa. And what happens if you then give them another mode of transport? You put them all on the bicycle. Or you put them on buses. Or you use the light railway. You see how much the space is consolidated by using these alternative modes of transport. Public transport in Astana is great, I have to say, and we use it when we come. But I think there is an opportunity maybe for the city to consolidate the infrastructure that you have. Before I move on, actually, I say the infrastructure doesn't have to be big things. It doesn't have to be roads, or it doesn't have to be irrigation systems. It can be very small things. So, for example, just putting a shower within every office or workplace will enable people to be able to cycle to their workplace and and shower and get changed before going to work. And all these small steps also go to help create a more a livable city, perhaps. So then looking at comfort, and here are some examples of traditional, what we call vernacular architecture. And this is architecture which is developed, or building which is developed in areas where you have to mitigate the climate. So for example, the building on the top left is an Irish house, a palm house from the Arabian Peninsula. And these houses are built using palm leaves, essentially. They protect the dwellers from the sun, but they filter the light and they filter the air. Really incredibly simple project, or simple buildings, but born out of the location and the climatic conditions of that particular location. Then a more urban form on the top left, using thermal mass, using thickness of the walls to actually absorb the heat of the sun and create a more comfortable environment within the buildings themselves. Now, the humans have been around for 200,000 years. We've only needed air conditioning for maybe 50, 60 years at this time. And then in the bottom corner we have a traditional building in the UK, again using local materials that are available but shaped by the need to shed rain, for example. There doesn't seem to be an urban typology for the step. And I think the master plan, again, the master plan for Astana kind of establishes a typology for the city. But in terms of an architectural typology, there isn't really an urban typology in the step. So perhaps this is something which will also help to reinforce Astana's identity within the world, to develop an architecture which is unique to your city and your location, which is able to adapt to the climate that you have here. And we look at scale, and again, it's not a criticism, because I enjoy Astana and I think it's a great success. But when you compare it to other cities, the scale of Astana is vast. So we have London at the top. On the left, where the square is Buckingham Palace, and if you go to the open square at the other end, that is Trafalgar Square. We have Paris, from the Arc de Triomphe to the Champs-Élysées. And then you have Astana again along the main boulevard, and you can see that actually Astana is reasonably low dense. And imagine when you're using your computer at home, you've kind of used up all your hard disk space, and you have to defragment the disk, and to make it more efficient, you kind of shrink the information down, and your computer works more efficiently. I can see how this might be an approach for Astana to help kind of create a denser, more efficient city. And I want to take an example, one of the streets in Astana. This is Mengele. It's a street which is almost 100 metres wide, and it's almost entirely dedicated to the motor car in terms of the scale. 10 lanes of cars, very little space for greenery and for human interaction, really. So I've just drawn a scale comparison. The shape here is the scale of Oxford Street in London. Oxford Street is the busiest shopping street in Europe. It attracts 500,000 people every day. And you compare the scale of Oxford Street to the scale of Mengele, and you see that there's quite a big disconnect between the two. This is Fifth Avenue in New York. And I tried to imagine then how does the architecture, how do the buildings, how does the urban landscape of Astana respond or deal with the climatic conditions? You have a lot of sun, you have a lot of wind, you have incredible temperature fluctuations from minus 40 degrees to plus 40. How does your city cope and deal with that? And how do you as people cope with that? You get in your cars, I guess. But it's Astana can be an incredibly exhausting city as a pedestrian. This is just a little image that kind of went viral on Twitter. But so there's two streets, one which is shaded, one which isn't. The shaded street has a temperature of 33 degrees. The unshaded street has a temperature which is more than double, 66 degrees. So what does that mean for Astana? How could Astana be adapted? How could the master plan be adapted to make the space more comfortable, more livable? And perhaps it's there's a number of different approaches. There's looking at the infrastructure, maybe trying to reduce the amount of car space there is, optimize your travel infrastructure, your community travel infrastructure. Create spaces for alternative modes of transport, for cycling. It may be only for 9 months of the year, but it's still possible. Maybe colonnades for people to be sheltered from the sun or from the harsh winter conditions. And create a park in the middle of the street to mitigate the heat in summer. And Astana is surrounded by water. Why not bring it into the city more? Use it to help create cooler spaces. And you have then a huge public park. Maybe it's a bit unfair to just use Astana as an example. So I've looked at the right bank also. This is Genghis Avenue. And I mean, this is actually quite symptomatic of a lot of Soviet cities, throughout the former Soviet Union, but also cities within Kazakhstan as well. And again, there's quite a large streetscape. A lot of space is given up to cars. And how can this space be adapted? How can this existing city be adapted to kind of create a more livable, comfortable city? You can apply similar techniques. You maybe replace the existing buildings with new buildings, or you can extend and adapt the existing buildings, make them more efficient, make them taller. You reduce the amount of expenditure on new buildings. You kind of be a bit more thrifty with your money. Create better public infrastructure for transport, space for cycling, and again colonnades, maybe spaces which can be tempered during the winter to make the space more comfortable, but create more human interaction. Just that space, that comparison again with London and New York. And how could this new architecture manifest itself? And there's some good examples recently of how architects have taken traditional techniques and found ways to give them new life, to kind of learn from the past. So the top left image is a building by the Egyptian architect Hassan Fatih, and he's taken very traditional techniques to produce a very contemporary architecture in Egypt. But then below is Masdar City in Abu Dhabi. And that then is kind of a combination. It's kind of using traditional techniques but new materials and using modern technology to help create a more sustainable city within the desert. And on the right, this is a project that I was project director for at IDIS, and where I met Asali Shanava and Derek Draper. And this building is uses a lot of Islamic architectural principles in terms of shading devices, which covered the building. And these shading devices, they stop the sun from penetrating through, but when the sun has passed, the devices open up to allow views out to the city. And this does a number of things. This helps reduce the air conditioning load, the energy required to cool the building, but also creates a much more transparent building and a more comfortable environment for the people working there. And so to conclude, I think what has been achieved in Astana is incredible. And as a city, it has really created a global presence. And it's known for its city and its architecture and its architectural symbols. It's also known for its humanitarian status too, in terms of hosting the Syrian tours. And now that Astana's master plan is largely established, might it now be time to see how the city is actually working and what aspects of the master plan can be developed and improved upon. But I understand that this might require a change in culture rather than a change in process. And it may be time to encourage a new generation of city planners to carry the baton and develop that initial vision from the previous generation to create a city that creates the optimum environment for its citizens to develop and thrive. So what will the shape of Aston be in the next 50 or 60 years? I imagine a livable city that is denser, which is more efficient and more comfortable, a city where its citizens can easily interact. Thank you very much.